to like how we wanted to introduce this. So I'm just gonna say
Right.
hi to everyone. Um, Welcome to the Brown Babe Field Notes podcast. Kind of a mouthful. The intro is gonna get smoother as y'all listen, promise. But my name is Chris. I am one half of the Brown Babe Field Notes podcast, um, and my other co-host.
So I'm Chanel. I'm the other half. We're excited that you all just came to join us and hear what we have to say. And we're definitely looking forward to smoothing out some kinks as we go.
Right. Um, So, one of the things that we wanted to talk about was actually the journey of the podcast. Just kind of how it came to be, the process of getting it off the ground, and then other things such as like what we're looking forward to and what kind of like fears or like hesitations we have. So I can start. I know I brought up the idea of actually I don't know. Should we do like the podcast stuff first or like how we actually like got to meet each other? Because I feel like that also plays a role.
That's a good point. Um, let's do our origin story. Let's do our origin story.
Okay. Um, so Chanel and I met in Raleigh, North Carolina, about 2 years ago. So still like pretty early on in the pandemic, like December 2020 or whatever. So I am not actually from Raleigh. I'm from Durham, but I moved to Raleigh for work in 2019. Then, of course, a couple of months later, the pandemic happened. And so it wasn't until maybe like the fall that I was able to start to meet people and make friends and whatnot. And so I actually met Chanel through someone else. We were at Applebee's of all places, and it was trash.
That was
But I remember that was my first time meeting Chanel, and I just thought she was hilarious. Yeah,
Yeah. So like Chris said, we did meet through a mutual friend. And it was interesting. Like when I first saw her, she had pink braids. She was wearing like this like big pink jacket. Um, and I was just like, oh, she's so cute. And then like she was like younger than me, so I was like, oh my god, she's just so cute. And I just like the personality. I was like, okay, like I like this girl's vibe. And that's how we met.
right. And I remember after we met, I was like, dang, I really want her to come on the cabin trip.
Yeah,
And so for context, the group of girls that I met a couple of months before Chanel and I met had planned a cabin trip in a couple of months for one of the girls' birthdays. Um, and by that point, like everything was pretty much like already booked. But I like really wanted Chanel to come just because I was like, oh my God, I don't want to lose her.
yeah.
So yeah. Usually I'm not that good when it comes to like having friend crushes and then actually doing something about it. I feel like I'm very much a just kind of long from afar and think of what could have been. So I don't really remember how we got to talking on our own. Because I know there was a group chat. Um, and yeah, because I'm also like pretty shy. So I'm like, I don't know how we actually ever got to communicating on a regular basis. But I remember like even by the summertime, you were like coming over to my place. We were like hanging out and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can't remember how we actually got to being like
So I think we
one on.
had the group chat. I know the first time after we hung out, one day we all went to like a Mexican spot. Do you remember we went there?
No.
Oh my gosh. So we had went to this Mexican spot and that's when I like actually like got like others like numbers. And I think in the group chat at some point, Chris was talking about like plants. And I was like, oh my God, I have houseplants too. I love plants. And I think that's when we started like I started like coming by your place and stuff like that. But I think as far as like when I got like your number and I like had you as like an individual contact in my phone because some people just save everyone's numbers in the group chat. But normally I don't because I'm like, we have this group chat to communicate, especially if the group, like, when you're in a group, sometimes like the group ties certain people together. And they're like, otherwise, like, I wouldn't really like talk to that person on their own.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because both Chris and I was using Bumble BFF, but I had never seen her on Bumble BFF like prior to us meeting, and I had been on it for a while. The friend we met through, that's how I met her. So it was so interesting that I literally didn't see Chris on Bumble BFF until maybe like a year and a half after I knew her.
It was a long
So that
time.
was, and it's
Yeah.
like we didn't live super far from each other or anything. That's so
Yeah.
strange. For me, it's hit or miss. Like, if I meet someone and I'm like, wow, like I need this person in my life, I'll shoot my friend shot for sure. I mean, I think Bumble BFF has kind of gotten me out of the kind of like nervous, like, damn, like that person's really a vibe. Like, you want to be my friend? Like, check yes or no. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, like I'll tell black women, like I'll tell you quick, like you're so pretty, like I love your energy, like I love your hair, like yes, I'm in a grocery store and I'm like, girl, you ain't have to do us like that, not in the self checkout aisle, like that's just like how I move. But yeah, that is how we
Yeah.
met.
I that's an interesting conversation about like shooting your shot when it comes. Is my light on? Um, that's an interesting conversation. Child, and my scarf is coming out. No. Um, that's an interesting conversation about, or topic rather, about shooting your shot when it comes to friends, because we pretty much always hear it as it relates to, couples,
Right.
partnering, that kind of thing. And I think it's also interesting in general when it comes to shooting your shot, in this day and age where a lot of the social interactions, whether they are seasoned or brand new, are pretty much digital, whether that's through social media, Instagram, Twitter, or through an app, whether that's
Yeah.
like Bumble BFF or Bumble Date, Hinge, Tinder, or whatever. Um, so I'm just thinking about like how, for me at least, it's so much easier for me to like shoot my shot if I'm like on Bumble BFF and everything. Because at least I know we're both on there presumably for the same reason.
Right.
I feel like people aren't on there like are never as desperate as I am for like social interaction. But if I see someone who like,
Right.
mentions like my keywords like intersectionality, Black Lives Matter, all this other stuff, plants, yoga, um roller skating, I'm
Yeah.
immediately like, oh my God, I want to meet this person. And then I don't really have so much of a problem with saying, oh my God, I'm so glad we matched, yada yada yada.
Yeah.
But if it was another situation where like I met someone through someone else and I was like, this person is so cool,
Yeah.
I wouldn't know how to just go up and be like, I want to be your friend. Because I
Yeah.
feel like, especially with girls,
Yeah.
um you can do that, but it's still more so just like oh yeah, you too, you're so sweet. Let's follow each other on Instagram. And I'm
Right.
like, Instagram is where relationships go to die, in
Yeah.
my experience.
I hate when someone's like
Uh,
on this social. I'm like, please, like,
like, do
let's
you want to
not
be
do
friends?
that. And you bring up a good point. I think it's also hard with groups because it's like, does this person like me the same as this person? Like, I've always kind of been in like a group or clique of sorts, even when I was in high school. Like, I have my best friend, but then we had like another friend and we were all best friends, and then she had her like own group branched off. So it's like it's sometimes hard in a group because to a certain extent you're like, okay, like these other women are probably also looking for friendship. Um, but at the same time, like I don't know, it's just like this like weird territory where it's like because you might be in a group and like someone's vibe out of the group more than the others. Like I might like person A's vibe over person B's, and that doesn't mean like I can't be friends with both. But there's going to be people who resonate more with you and your spirit. You know what I mean? So you're going to cling to those people more, and to a certain extent, prioritize building a relationship with that person more than the other person. So I don't know. I'm interested in how people who have like groups like navigate that. Because yeah, of course you're not gonna be the same kind of friend with every single person in the group, right? Like sometimes it's just a matter of like we're cordial, like we're cool, like we hang out. But I don't know, like especially like large group friends where it's like, oh, this is my girls group and it's like 5, 6 girls. I'm like, you vibe with
Right.
all those bitches, like every single one, because
Right.
I just this normally is just like I gravitate toward. Even with like this is a complete tangent, but even with like dating, you talk to multiple people, but once someone kind of stands out to me, I'm like, like I naturally invest more in the person that I'm interested in by default. So
Right. And then I feel like when it comes to groups, like, like you were saying, 5 plus or
yeah,
whatever, and how we tend to just naturally develop more of a closeness with maybe like one other person as opposed to like maybe the other four in the group.
right,
And so then I feel like that makes it difficult to navigate like social interactions because I'm thinking, okay, if I'm in a group of like maybe 5 girls, we all have like our cute little group chat, yada, yada, yada.
right,
And maybe we have like a routine get together, like brunch or dinner, whatever. But there are times when maybe I just want to like run some errands and I don't want to coordinate with
right,
4 other people. So I'm like, let me just, reach out to my actual bestie, the one I
right,
vibe with the most. And then
yeah.
I feel like if you were to do that and then the other people in the group found out, it'd be like, well, why wasn't I invited?
Yeah. Or like if you're texting them separately and y'all got like your own inside joke, it's like, oh, you some real any kind of bitches, huh? Like it's like, no, nothing like that. Like, whoa. Even if it's something they're not interested in, like if I'm in a group of 5 and 2 of us got dogs and go to the dog park, why are you who are dogless mad?
Right.
Why? Like what was you
Yeah.
gonna do? You without a dog. You know what I mean? So I'm just like, ooh. And I'm like, I wonder if like guys and guy groups have that same issue. Like if it's like if
Mhm.
you hear like snuffing and huffing, I have a little dog. She's right here. And she's like and she wants me to pick her up and I'm not gonna pick her up. So but yeah, it's like, ugh. I don't want to
Yeah.
hurt feelings. You know what I mean? I'm someone who's really conscious of how I show up in a space, right? And not even I think people sometimes confuse that with being someone who cares what people think, right? Or people always make caring what people think a negative thing. When in
Okay.
reality, I feel like a certain amount of self-awareness, like you're going to be aware of how you are existing in a space, how you're navigating relationships, how you're navigating conversations, others' feelings, especially if you care about them. You know what I mean? So it's not even a matter of like, oh, like you caring too much what other people think. No, like I just wouldn't want to hurt anyone's feelings unintentionally when like that's not even the vibe. You know what I mean? Like some things are like super avoidable, or like miscommunications, and I feel like a lot of times like friendships disintegrate for that reason because like especially amongst women, like you feel a way, like you start to kind of like harbor it and like hold on to it because you don't seem like you're doing too much. And now it's like beefy. You know what I mean? Like now we move and mixy for no reason. So I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, I think that's something that I also struggle with balancing where it comes to being self-aware and understanding how I show up in a space versus caring about what other people think of me. Because for me, at least, it can be a thin line. Like sometimes I am more so like, okay, I'm aware of like how I'm taking up the space, but I don't really care whose feelings I'm hurting.
Right.
Like for instance, if I'm in a meeting or in a group of people or whatever, and I'm keeping quiet because I'm like, y'all really don't want to hear my mouth if you ask me. And then they ask me, I'll be like, I'm gonna be real with you, yada yada yada, blah blah blah.
Because
And
I
I don't
wasn't gonna
really
say
care.
nothing. But now that you open the floor,
So yeah, so when it comes to that kind of situation, then that's one thing. But I feel like most of the times I'm very hyper aware of how I take up space, and how people receive me. Which I feel like I don't know if that's the same thing. How I take up space. Like I don't know if there's a difference between worrying about how people receive you and worrying about what people think. Maybe they're the same thing. I don't know. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm just like I'm rambling at this point. All that to say is like sometimes for me, I feel like it's hard to distinguish the two or balance the two. Because I feel like it comes down to the root. Like, okay, are you aware of how you take up space
Right.
just because you're empathetic and self-aware, or are you hyper aware of the way you take up space because like as like some type of uh trauma response,
Right.
not trauma response, but like due to past trauma or whatever, where you're like, okay, I have to be aware of how I take up space
Right.
because I have to be able to predict other people's emotions so I can be prepared. So I guess it comes down to the root of it, but
I think,
I
like
don't
you
know.
said, it's a thin line. Um, and I think like a big part of what differentiates the two is like, are you filtering like who you are to accommodate others, right? Like,
Mhm.
if it's something that can be easily switched on and off, like if there's somebody who's like Mormon, I have a friend who's Mormon or very religious, and like cursing like might offend them. So I'm like, okay, like let me try not to curse around this person. I don't think that's really me not being myself, right? Because like the core of who I am is not somebody who cusses. You know what I mean? Like, will I throw in a decorate something? Sure. But
Hmm.
do I feel like I am changing my core beliefs? Like what makes Chanel Chanel? No. So I think when you're altering and like filtering who you are, that's when it's like, okay, like you might now be the way my brain will actually blank. Um like basically you might now be like in problem territory. But I do feel like you said,
Yeah.
it is a thin line. And also the line between like, is this a normal amount of self awareness, or am I being hyper aware? Like that's like, ooh.
Hmm.
And I honestly feel like to a certain extent that's subjective. Like what's normal to someone like might be hyper aware to me. You know what I mean? And vice versa. So
Right. All right. Well, that was a fun tangent.
I
Um, our origin story.
was gonna say Chris and I we like tangents. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so the reason why I was wondering if it would make the most sense to bring up our origin story, how we got to meet and everything, was because I feel like that, at least for me, was um, it one, it kind of like explains our relationship in a way, which we didn't dive too much into. But I feel like our relationship is more so the reason, at least for me, why at least like I was thinking like it would make sense for us to have a podcast or it would be fun just because of the kind of conversations we have. Um, and I'm like, you know what? We be making points. We really be out here making points. So I'm like, okay, what's easier? Trying to get into TED Talk and just being like, listen to us talk, or doing a cute little podcast? Um, and and yeah, I don't. I actually, now that I think about it, I don't know where I was going with that. But that's kind of how the podcast idea kind of came to be. I remember, I can't remember what conversation we were having, but I know it was like maybe mid, early May. Um, and we were just having a ta 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 ta, like back and forth, just vibes. Um, and actually, you know what? I'm gonna look it up. I'm gonna look it up in our messages right now. I'm gonna, what did I say? Uh, do you want to, no, that's not how you spell that. Let me see. Start. Okay, did I say do you want to start a podcast? Okay, podcast with you. I'm gonna do that. I
I
feel like
think
I
it
said
was
podcast.
like, yeah, it wasn't like a formal it wasn't like, do you want to start a podcast with me? It was like, all right, I'm gonna say it. Let's do a
Right. Yeah.
podcast. Like it was very much like that kind of energy. And while like Chris searches it, yeah, like her and I often will send one another either like a screenshot, or normally it's a screenshot, or like a picture, or like something we came across on like socials. And be like, thoughts. Like, what do you think about this? Like, what is your take on this? Or send one another like a video or like a clip of something that we heard. And sometimes we just have our own random like thoughts, um, like how do you feel about this, or like what would it take for you to do that? So we were like, wow, like we're actually having like really well thought out, like valuable conversations. And I don't know about Chris, but I know prior, like I've like always kind of wanted to have like a platform to like speak on, but I could never actually like make myself like do it. So like people are like, oh, you should do like YouTube, or like, oh, like you should be like a therapist, like you're so inspirational, like kind of like a Dear Abby column. I was
Dear
like,
Abby.
oh, this is so cute. Like,
Wait, what's
yes,
Dear
write
Abby?
me. Let me read. Yes. Like I've always kind of been into that. So when Chris was like that's it. Like I'm gonna ask you, like, do you want to do a podcast kind of like tease? I was like, yes, like let's do it. Because we do have like honestly really great like in-depth conversations just on a day to day.
Wait, so what's Dear Abby?
Yeah, so Dear Abby is it was like a columnist of sorts. Like you basically like Dear Abby, like my husband has been coming home late and I'm not quite sure if I should confront him because he does work a lot and pay. Like it was basically like an advice column of sorts. Um so like Dear Abby is kind of almost like we're coming to your desk with this. Like what shall we do? And us being like, let's peel this apart, right? Let's peel the layers off. Let's see what's what.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Okay. So I found it. I wish I could find the date, but I think we were talking a lot here. So I actually misremembered. We weren't really going da 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 on anything. It was actually a pretty random thing of me to say. We had sent a couple of TikToks back and forth, and we're talking about those. And that's when I was in Wegmans getting Arizona. No, no, no. That's when I had gotten that Arizona tea,
Yeah.
and I got like the lemon flavor, and you were like, you got this flavor out of the entire selection. Yeah. Um, and then we were just talking about some other stuff, and I remember, not I remember, I'm looking at it. I said, "What's the goal you have for this year?" Which is kind of like just one of those like random questions we'll have for each other that kind of leads into a deeper conversation. And then right after that, I was like, "I want to make a podcast with you." There, I said it. And it was, yes, that would be so fun, yada, yada, yada. And so that's how it actually started. I feel like that was a really long way of saying we met each other in 2020, we became friends, and then one of us was like, let's start a podcast.
Yeah. And
uh,
like I said, like it'll be like TikToks or like one of us would randomly be like, okay, like what's the oldest of like a person you'll like befriend or like a person you'll date? And then we'll like literally have a whole conversation. Like by the time we're like an hour into the conversation, we're talking about like grooming and friendships and relationships. Like it's like a whole thing.
right.
So we were like, this is what the people need to know, honestly. Like somebody need to hear this. And here we are.
So I know that after we were like, let's do a podcast. Um, and this is honestly all my fault. The entire process could have been expedited. But I guess in my mind, I was thinking, oh, the podcast cover should have both of us. I don't know. Like when I think about it now, I don't know what the fuck I was thinking. But in May, I had a very clear idea. And for whatever reason, it involved us like having pictures. So me and Chanel, we went on Pinterest. We were like looking up like friend poses and everything. And that day, it was like, if you're in North Carolina, you know how the weather is. Like it'll be kind of like how it is right now. It's kind of rainy, it's cloudy, but it's still like 85 degrees and humid. And actually that the day that we were taking photos, I was hungover like a bitch. I was so sick. Um yeah, I was so sick. And um so we were like at the park doing these poses we saw on Pinterest. And then we went back to my place and tried doing like some planned candids kind of thing. Um, and I was thinking we would pick out the photo that we liked, which we did, then have a portrait of it, and then have like that would be the cover.
Right.
But it wasn't until like weeks later, because around that time I was also moving. So I feel like the conversation of the podcast didn't really come up again until like July. By the time we Oh, I think it was like by the time I reached out to that Russian girl and had already paid her,
Yeah.
that I was like, you know what? How are we gonna actually put the title on here? Like
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know how like the title is actually gonna work on a it didn't make as much sense to me anymore.
Right.
And then y'all will never see this, but we got the results, and if you how to say this nicely, because I don't want to offend anyone. If you're black, you might have more easily picked up on when I said that it was a Russian person who drew us. So I'm gonna leave that where that was. Um, yeah, and I was like, I talked to Chanel. I was like, how do I tell her this
Yeah.
looks so bad?
Yeah.
My head looked like a trapezoid.
Yeah.
Um, oh my god! And she redid it, and it was still just like no. And then I think, I don't know if it was you or me. I think it was probably you who like actually looked up podcast cover on like Fiverr or something. And I was like, oh my God, what, why did my mind not go there? That there are people who actually make, who like actually do this. Like they
Yeah.
will. So, that was that. Oh, but I feel like I skipped a part. The actual coming up with the name. Do you want to like talk about that?
Oh yeah, that was a process. I'm trying to remember. Chris knows I have a horrible, horrible memory. But we essentially wanted, like, we knew that the type of content that we wanted to put out, right? We wanted it to be like lifestyle, but also tailored to conversations surrounding like being a black woman, like navigating things as a black woman, relationships with family, relationships with friends, relationships with partners, your relationship with like your workspace, right? Like your relationship with yourself. So we were trying to incorporate those things into a succinct title, but also both of us, like, we often have conversations surrounding like black women not really having room to be soft, not having like stability and security and safety to really be like just soft, the softest parts of themselves, basically. Um,
Yeah.
so we wanted a title that was like cute, but also basically kind of mirrored how our conversations go because they're very much like um I almost referenced the show, but they're very much like kind of like Chris was saying.
Mhm.
It's very much like I don't know how to describe it. Like it's spur of the moment. It's like will like it'll like be in depth. Some things are silly. Some things are serious. Like
I feel like
it
it's
doesn't
really
have
like just
like
complex.
yeah, yeah. It doesn't have like this like strict structure. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm not sure like what names we toyed with prior. I don't keep my threads. Don't try to come for me. I
It's
do have
wild to
iPhone
me.
storage, but I don't keep threads that I'm not like. Even though Chris and I talk almost daily, I always feel like if I have like a long thread with someone, my phone is like your space, and I'm like, I pay you 99 cents a month to have space. But anyway,
Right.
so I delete my threads when they're like packed. Um, so, but Chris like keeps her thread, so she probably has like some like draft names um that we like tossed around before we settled on Brown Babe Field Notes.
And so it's probably not surprising given just how this conversation has gone. It's kind of like all over the place, and I think that's also like indicative in our text thread as well. Um, so which makes it hard to actually find what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Let me see. It so this was actually back in May. This was mid-May. I didn't realize that we came up with the name that early.
Yeah.
Um, and so we were talking about fonts, um, and then one of us asked, just like, what would a good name be? And so I had mentioned not one of our podcasts, one of the, oh my God, a podcast that I like, and it was just like the girls' names, like A and B. But I was like, Chris and Chanel just like does not pop the way it just doesn't like taste as flavorful as I want it to. Um, and so we looked up some Black girl podcasts and everything, and kind of went back and forth around like sort of like the words that we liked. So I liked the word diaries. We were thinking about maybe using an AAVE idiom, and for those who don't know what that is, that's African American Vernacular English. Maybe doing like a play off an expression. So Chanel recommended on the rocks or straight no chaser. Um, and girl, now we talking about fried fish. So I don't. So Chanel was actually the one who came up with the name Brown Babe Field Notes because what I had written was what about Black Girl Field Notes? Because you said that you really liked the word field notes, and kind of to what you were saying a couple of minutes ago, as far as like having this air of softness. Um, just I don't know, brown babe field notes just was kind of like I don't know. I feel like it just like feels different than just black girl
Right.
field notes. But yeah, so that was part of the journey. And we got to the podcast cover and that was fun. The person who did it was really talented. Then we got our jingle, which at first neither of us were really like, we were kind of cool on it, especially like coming off of. So I think like just the trajectory of getting the art like visually and musically was just like played a role. So us going from like not having a good experience with the first person who did our portraits to then having someone who actually knows what they're doing, that just kind of I feel like got us like really excited and maybe even
Yeah.
more excited than we maybe would have been if we weren't going in with very low expectations based off of our initial experience with that person off Instagram. Um, and so, at least for me, I was kind of in this high where I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna like use Fiverr for everything. And finding people who could do a jingle was kind of a process and a half because everyone was like, oh, I'll write a song for you. And I'm like, no, I don't want that.
Right.
And so then when we actually got the jingle, it was kind of like the high from the podcast cover,
Yeah.
which was higher than it probably would have been. If we hadn't had that bad experience, it just kind of plummeted because I was like, oh, okay. Because I think it's easier to conceptualize something visual
Right.
than something musical. And like we had like so many, not so many, we had like maybe four references. But I liked them so much that I was just thinking, oh, it has to sound exactly like this. And
Right.
then when it wasn't like plagiarized, basically, I was like, this is kind of mid.
Yeah.
Um, but I, it was like maybe a week or a couple of days later, I was just playing it because I was like, damn, do I like this? You have to like accept, like basically um, approve the product that they send you. And so I was playing it and I was like, damn, it's kind of cute. And then I just went through a phase where I was like up fucking obsessed with it. I think it is so cute. Um, yeah, and then that was no, that wasn't the end because then we had to figure out the software.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
The jingle. The jingle was kind of so, I mean, like Chris said, seeing something visually versus hearing it, it's just easier. Like with the drawing, she was kind of basing it off of pictures that we had sent her of ourselves and together. Right. So you
Hmm.
almost have something to compare it to be like, okay, like my head looks like an actual box. Like this was not it. Or like,
Hmm.
oh, like my nose is half my face. Like, how did you get that from that picture? Right. But with
Right.
audio, it is hard to compare it, right? So we kind of told her like the style that we both like. Um, we both kind of like a lo-fi like sound. But we didn't, like lo-fi, they have like work and they have like sleep. Um, so we didn't want something that was too snoozy. But we wanted something that was girly. We wanted something that was catchy. Um, Something cute. And so when I first heard it, to me, I was just like, okay, like it was hard for me to be like, I
Right.
like this or I don't like this because I didn't have anything to hold it up against. Um, and I feel like with images, you can say I like this one more than the other, but with music, for me at least, like I can like two completely different sounds the same. Because they both
Yeah.
do different things for me. You know what I mean? So that was kind of
Right.
difficult, but I like saved the file like when Chris sent it to me, and I was kind of like listening to it, and I could picture it being our jingle. I literally feel like I said like exactly that to her. Like I could see this being our jingle. Like it kind of fades. We start talking. Like it's our little outro too. Like that. Um, but like Chris said, after the jingle, then we were like, okay, like what software do we want to use? Do we want to use microphones? Do we want to do audio and
Hmm.
visual? Like, do we want multiple softwares and like because some softwares, oh, you can record on it, but you can't edit on it. Or you can record, edit, and post in it. And also looking at like the prices of things, considering like we're starting up. That was a factor, of course. So trying to like do research really and figure out like what is the best avenue to go down, like starting off.
Right. Right. So that was how that was the journey of the podcast. So I guess now we can move on to, um, well, we're still talking about the podcast basically, but moving on from the creation of it and more so thinking about what ideas or hopes we have for the future of the podcast. I know earlier you were saying when it came to the title of the podcast, just kind of like the vibe we were going for. And I remember maybe June or July or something, I don't know. We were talking about just the different ideas that we had as far as once we maybe get like a solid a solid amount of like listeners or whatever. Um, and so we were talking about like creating a Patreon when the time comes, and just kind of like just different like more like logistic things. So I'm curious to hear like outside of that, if you have any hopes for like where like how you would like the podcast to be, um, even like a month or 6 months from now.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So starting off, we kind of discussed posting like weekly. But ideally, like I would want us to be able to like post more often and for our posts to kind of reflect like content that not only based on conversations that we enjoy having, but like that our listeners are also curious about like just our belief and our take on.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like when you get to a point where like someone comes to you, I mean, we might have like friends or we go to each other and we're like, how do you feel about this? But like when like a listener does it and it's not coming from like a place of like messiness, right? Like, oh, you heard about the situation, how do you feel about that? And they trying to like shake the table. But it's more so like I feel like you have good points. I'm interested in like how you feel about this or like how I should navigate this situation. Um, because I feel like there are a lot of people who just don't have like especially in our age group, like we've had this conversation before, like they don't have close friends. Like they don't have like strong friendships. They don't have friendships with black women. Um, they struggle with like maintaining their friendships, or for some reason they can feel like the outsider in their relationship, like in their friendship, which is a relationship. But like, oh, like, my two close friends had kids and like I don't relate to that anymore. Or like my two close friends are religious and like I don't relate to that anymore. You know what I mean? Um, my goal is really just to like build an audience that we can connect with. Um, and to like be able to like make content often. Um, Also, like I mentioned, like the Christian said, the Patreon, for kind of more like behind the scenes content. I think that'll be fun. I've seen like people have Patreons, and I think they're cute. I think they're interesting. It kind of helps you get to know like your host more. And of course, like when we have certain conversations, we kind of share our own stories and things like that. But I think for like a more in-depth feel, I think Patreon will be dope. But yeah, those are like some that's ultimately like my goal or like my vision for Brown Babe Field Notes. What about you?
Um, it's funny because 5 seconds ago I thought I had an answer. Um, and I'm just thinking of like outside of the logistics of like having a Patreon or even having people. What is it that they have on Anchor where you can like where they can like do voice messages or like you can like put a
Like
poll or
yeah,
whatever. Even outside of that, I'm just thinking, what do I actually want from the podcast?
right.
Um, and it's actually kind of tying in for me, at least, the next topic about like our fears and hesitations. And I guess like at the bare minimum, I just in the next, I mean, it's probably maybe won't happen in like the next month. That's only like a couple of episodes from now. But even over the next couple of months, um, just having a product, whatever we want to call this, a space where it feels authentic but also uniquely ours.
Yeah,
Um, and so authentic, uniquely ours, and representative. I feel like just throughout my life, I've kind of had to pick either one or two and never had like all three. So something could be authentic and it could be uniquely me, but it didn't necessarily feel like representative of like the wholeness of like who I am.
yeah,
Um, and I think at least for me, I get into what are a thought pattern, something where I feel like things have to be perfect.
right.
And so, in order for them to be perfect, I can't just live candidly or do things candidly and just like let the universe or whatever life like situate itself and figure it out for me. Um, so I guess like at the very least, that's just like what I would want is us having a space where a couple of months down the road or whenever um it just feels like we're in the groove. Um and how we were saying a couple of months ago that we didn't necessarily want to have stuff like super strict in the beginning as far as like, oh, we can like have this section and this section and this section because we want the podcast to develop its own personality organically. Um, but I think it would just be nice to like be in a space in the future where I can like look back and be like, see, I had nothing to worry about because it figured itself out.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah,
yeah,
I think in the description, like in the description we had the description obviously as far as like what we want to talk about, but yeah, but yeah, you were gonna say something.
yeah. I think you make a good point. When you guys started talking, I was thinking, and I'm like, I feel like the reason I've always essentially kind of wanted a platform of sorts. I'm not sure if you've ever thought to like do YouTube or anything like that, but um, is because I wanted a place where I can like be myself and also connect with others. And kind of how you said, like to a certain extent, you feel like you have to choose. I felt like that before. Like I felt like that. I feel like that in the workplace. I feel like that. I feel like that in relationships. I felt like that in friendships, where it's like, can I fully, wholly? vulnerably be myself and still connect with people. You know what I mean? Like, not even a matter of still being accepted, but like still connect with others, like as I am, without having to like dumb anything down or like, anything of that nature. So that was just something that crossed my mind when you guys started speaking. Um, Having a platform where you can be yourself, um, but also connect with other people and assist other people, and like you're just being you, right? Like you're not performing. Having a space that
Right.
isn't performative, I think, is important, especially as a Black woman. So
Right. Um, yeah, I think the candidness is also something that I really want. I mean, that's not something that you can really plan
yeah,
or just create in the like on your own. It has to just happen organically, which
right,
means that for me at least, I have to like let go of the idea that it has to be a certain way, it has to be perfect or whatever. Um, and yeah. One other though, kind of like fear I have, or is there something that kind of like makes me anxious in regard to the podcast is since it's also a visual podcast, I feel like now I have like the added stress of wanting to look
yeah.
presentable.
My God.
So like even like a little before we got on to record, I was like freaking out about my hair. So you guys obviously wouldn't know, but yesterday I took out my knotless braids, and I could have waited until today to do it, but I like get in these moments where I'm like, if something gets in my mind, I want to do it right that second. So for me, I was like, oh no, I have to wash my hair tonight. So I took out my braids, washed my hair, plaited it, and then I took it out today, and I was like, I look like Boo Boo the Fool.
Yeah,
Like what?
yeah,
Um, and so even like like then like that's why I'm wearing a scarf basically. Or I'm wearing a scarf, and then like getting earrings. And so it's kind of funny that you mentioned like it's rare to have a space for Black women where they don't have to basically perform. And
right.
that could be its own conversation just about
Yeah,
like presentableness in like the
yeah,
Black community, specifically with Black women. But
yeah,
that was just something that also just kind of like makes me a little anxious since we have that added component of a visual
yeah.
podcast.
I feel like that's something that's always, even when I thought of like doing YouTube, like that's something that's always been like a weird spot for me, is not necessarily being on camera, but like literally right before Chris and I started recording, I was like, my face is slanted. Like, if you have an iPhone, the iPhone like flips you, and my face like will look diagonal, and I cannot stop thinking about it. So it'll drive me crazy. And like I won't even be thinking about like what I'm saying. And I'm just like, oh my
Mhm.
God, like I look this way, I look that way. Um,
Right.
and it's interesting you say that. So about a few months ago, I was going through it. I had like finished my massage program and I graduated. I was stressed and I cut all my hair off. I was like, I'm over it. I'm sick of it. And so whenever I have my hair cut, I only like it when it's like buzzed low or when it's at least like 6 months grown out. I hate the in between phase. So this
Right.
is
It's
obviously
awful.
a wig, but my goal, I had to like think about it for a while, but like I want to lock my hair. So the in between phase of like my hair growing out, I'm just like, oh my God, it drives me crazy. But again, Chris brought up a good point of like being presentable as a Black woman, but also like it starts when we're like little girls, right? Like your hair being done, like what you're wearing, but also like again, this we'll probably end up doing a separate podcast on this, but like it coming down to like reflecting on your parents and their parenting. And I mean, we're both
Mhm.
adults, like in our 20s. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, like I could go outside in an actual hefty bag with a hole in it. And like, who's going to do what?
Right.
Like, who's going to do what? You know what I mean? So that's a conversation that'll probably end up happening.
Right. Okay, so that was just kind of like the journey, just everything specifically related to the podcast. And so we kind of sort of talked about it earlier when we were talking about like our origin story. And maybe like you guys have gotten an idea just about like our personality and everything. Um, but we also wanted to do a section where you all could just kind of get to know us, but like not in an annoying, not in like an annoying icebreaker kind of way, but more so just like a non-traditional way. So I have what the hell? I have some cards, some like conversation cards. They are it's called Reflex. I can't remember the website. But it's called Reflex. And Reflex questions you actually want to answer. So I figure we'll just, shuffle these bad boys and see what the Lord gives us. Oh my God, are these? What the hell? Oh man, they're mixed up. Damn it. Okay. Um. Cool. This one. We'll just do this one. Um. What themes keep popping up in your dreams? Um. So yeah, you want to? You can go.
Mm.
For
So
me personally, I don't have any.
I was just going to say, I haven't recently had a dream that I remember. When I was younger, I used to have like, I used to be big
Mm.
into dreams. Like I had a dream journal where I could look up like symbols and like what it meant. And to be honest, they're almost always like on point, right? Like if I have a dream and what stands out in the dream, there could be many facets, but if what stands out is like uh, uh um I'm thinking the word waterfall, but that's not what I want. It's like a wave or a tsunami, like a big wave crashing
Okay.
type thing, right? So if I look that up, it will like reflect exactly like what I've been feeling, my thoughts, like what's been going on in my life. But I haven't been having dreams that I remember, honestly.
How long has that been? So you said like when you were a kid you had vivid dreams, and now you don't really have dreams like that or ones that you remember. Was
Right.
that has that been since you were a kid or like how recently is the whole
Um,
dream thing?
I would say a few like years. It really depends. Like
Okay.
there are times where I'll have like a vivid dream where I remember something. Um, but it's rare. Like I honestly cannot pinpoint um like when I'll have one that I remember and when I won't.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know. What about you?
I kind of similar. I had dreams more often when I was younger. I do remember when I was 13, there was a period where I was kind of having premonitions in a way. So I would dream something and then it would happen within like at school or something.
Okay.
But also I like went through a period where I was like having in the same period I was having a lot of nightmares.
Okay.
So coupling nightmares with premonition, you're just kind of like, okay, this is gonna happen.
Right.
Is something bad gonna happen today? Um, and I think that's also around the time, and I might have done this a little before, but that was around the time that I also started to have like lucid dreams. I didn't know that they were lucid dreams at the time, but like if I was having a nightmare, for instance, um, I will usually feel like I can't control myself. So
Mm,
like if something's coming towards me, it's like I can't make myself move.
mm,
But and that so that's like me in like my front brain in my
mm.
dream, but in my base brain in my dream, I know that I am dreaming.
Yeah.
Um and so it's almost like there's like still like that small part of me that is awake that's just trying to communicate to my dream self, and it's
Right.
almost like like my throat is caught and I can't really like tell myself, hey, you can move, this is a dream.
Right.
But there were moments around that period where since I was having so many nightmares, I just tried practicing that, and when I told myself and I was able to communicate to myself this is a dream, um, I was able to like move my body in my dream and everything, and like basically like have it not be a nightmare anymore. But
Yeah.
yeah, usually I don't have dreams, and if I do, I forget them within like 5 minutes.
Yeah. Some people are like, oh, write them down, like have a notebook next to your bed. But like the way my sleep will be disrupted if I like wake up a little bit and then I'm like, let me write this down. Like, let's
Mhm.
not do that.
Right.
Let's not do that. Like I already keep like a nightlight in my bathroom to avoid flipping the whole light on and messing up my sleep. So I'm just like, mm-mm,
Hmm.
mm-mm.
Okay. So we have like 10 minutes left before the recording stops because we are doing a free trial right now for the software.
Sure.
So we can do this in like the next 4 or 5 minutes, and then we can wrap up over like the last couple of minutes.
Yeah.
So, mm, okay, this might turn into a thing. Um, are you more likely to judge someone by their words or their actions?
Actions for sure. Like, because I feel like intent doesn't matter when the execution is not there, right? Like, I
Mm,
could be like, Chris, like, I'm sorry I snatched your scarf off. And then if I snatch it off, you're going to be like, you're not acting like someone who's sorry. And the keyword
mhm.
would be acting, right? So I'm definitely more so someone who's looking at action versus intention. Like my love language is intention and action lining up. I can't even hold you. And that's for friends, that's relationships, all
Yeah.
across the board, right?
Mhm.
Because I'm holding you accountable for what you're saying, right? Like it's like if your actions are not lining up with your words, like why would I believe your words, right?
Right.
So for me, definitely hands down action. What about you?
See, I would, I feel like on a regular day, I would say actions, but the way I interpreted the question
Mm,
was I really focused on the word judge.
mm,
Um, and so to me, like I have like a negative association with judge. So I'm thinking you're judging someone, you're being judgmental.
mm,
Um, and so I feel like at least the severity to which I judge, um, especially like with like first impressions, I feel
right.
like it's words instead of actions. Because like if someone, for instance, does something dumb in Target, I might be like, you know what? Let me put myself in their shoes, and then that kind of helps me like just kind of like empathize and be like, okay,
Yeah,
it's not that deep. Um, but if someone like fixes their mouth to say some bullshit,
yeah.
I'm just like,
You said
you
that.
said that?
Yeah.
You said that. Whether it's like, and it's I don't know why. And so like if I'm in like in a relationship, whether platonic, romantic,
Right.
long term, definitely like I judge people by their actions.
Yeah.
Um, so like I like will judge the quality of their character and their respect towards me by their actions. But when it actually comes to judging a person, um, at least initially, their words will sometimes like set me off sooner than actions will. Like if someone like kind of does a weird move, I might be like, "All right, I'm gonna maybe that was a slip." But if someone like says something, I'm more likely to be annoyed because
Mm,
now I feel like I gotta argue with you. Now I feel like I
mm.
gotta argue with you. Um, so yeah, I would say it's kind of both,
Yeah.
but
See, and
in
I'm not an
certain
arguer. Like if I notice like like you on weird time, I'm just like, ugh. Like I'm like a fallbacker. I'm just like, okay. Like because at our big old ages, like, baby, like Chanel not about to be Miss Frizzle and educating you on like why you said what you said and why you went about it this way. And I'm like, y'all don't see no kids in here. I got this little raggedy dog. Y'all don't see no kids in here. So for me to have to like sit an adult down and be like, look, like when you carry the one and you square root the two, like, baby, that's not Z. Like, mm-mm.
Hmm.
I'm almost frustrated the conversation even had to happen. So now I'm like, I'm still gonna be like, ooh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Yeah, that stuff, that's an interesting one. I'm
yeah,
gonna try this later. But okay, I guess we can go ahead and wrap up. Um, it's funny because I was kind of skimming podcasts to just kind of see like how people do podcasts as if I have never heard of a podcast before. And I, which is kind of like me a lot of the times, whether it's a YouTube video or a Netflix show, I never finished any of the podcasts, so I never heard like any of the outros. So I'm just like, do people just say bye? But
yeah,
even in meetings, I suck at just like when I'm done doing a training or something, I'm just like, okay,
yes,
bye, I
right,
guess.
right.
Um, but I guess here, we can just let y'all know where to find us. So on all socials except for Twitter, because we don't have a Twitter right now.
Correct.
Um, on all socials except for Twitter, you can find us at Brown Babe Field Notes. Um, and we will be posting these podcasts on Wednesdays. Is it Wednesdays?
I think
So
it's
yeah,
Wednesday.
so every Wednesday, you guys can expect to hear from us. And if you made it this far, thank you.
Yeah,
I know this was kind of like all over the place, but yeah. So that's that for the first episode.
yeah.
I don't know if I should be celebrating or what, but yeah. So I guess we will see you guys next week after, I think after Labor Day.
After,
Um, yeah. So yeah, we'll see you guys next week. Have
yeah.
a good one, y'all.
Bye.